This Week in Connecticut with Dennis House starts now.
Greetings, everyone, and thanks for being with us. I'm Dennis House. Straight ahead today, the battle against Congressman John Larson. He is being challenged by former Hartford Mayor Luke Bronin, who joins me today. Helping thousands across central Connecticut, Shawana Swain of the Middlesex County United Way is also here. Plus, antique cars. Bud Wilkinson talks about his really fun and super fascinating job chronicling some beautiful automobiles right here in Connecticut. And it is pool season, and this beast decided to take the plunge in a local family pool. First up, though, the lead. Congressman John Larson is running for re-election, but he's being challenged from within his own Democratic Party. We heard from Larson last week. Today, one of those other candidates is with us, the former mayor of Hartford. And joining us now is the former mayor of Hartford, Luke Bronin, now a candidate for Congress in the 1st Congressional District. And Mayor Bronin, good to see you here on the program.
Good to see you again, Dennis.
So last time I had you on here, you were thinking about what was going to be next. We spoke last year during the presidential campaign, and then there was a lot of speculation that you wanted to run for governor if Governor Lamont did not run, and now you're running for Congress. How did you get to this point?
Look, I think you know the world we're in is a whole different world than it was even 9 months ago or 10 months ago. Donald Trump is president again. You know, we lost not just the White House, but the Senate and the House, to a party that's led by a president who I think is increasingly defined by chaos and corruption and increasingly cruelty. And I want to see a Democratic Party that's responding to that forcefully, clearly, that's pushing back against Donald Trump relentlessly, but that is also laying out a very clear case for how we are going to build an economy that actually works for most people, because I think that's one of the reasons that we lost.
And how did you decide to run for Congress? How did you reach that?
Well, because I think at this moment, the biggest threats to our democracy, to stability, to our economy are coming out of Washington. And I am worried about the Democratic Party because I don't see the clarity and the forcefulness that I think myself and a lot of Democrats want to see out of every single member of Congress.
Do you think Congressman Larson is no longer effective?
I think that after 28 years, it's time to let some new voices in.
What about Rosa DeLauro, who's going to be 83 in March?
I'm focused on one district.
Yeah, should she step aside also for a younger generation?
I'm focused on one district where I think that it's time, after all these years, to make a change. And as I've gone around the district, Dennis, I've spent a lot of time in the 27 towns that make up Connecticut's 1st district, and I feel and I sense that a lot of people feel the same way, which is have an enormous amount of respect and admiration for John Larson and for everything he's done for the last nearly 30 years down there. But that this is a moment when, as a Democratic Party, we have to start doing some things differently. And I think that for me and in my district, starts at home.
Do you think he's too old to be in Congress?
I think that 28 years, it's time for some new perspectives. I mean, look, in this job, I would bring a different set of experiences. As you know, I served in the Navy in Afghanistan. I was a Navy intelligence officer. I worked in the Obama administration for 4 years, both in the wake of the financial crisis and then in a national security role. Worked as the chief legal counsel to our governor, and then 8 years through some of the most challenging years in City of Hartford's history. And I think that set of experiences brings a different perspective. The other thing I would say, though, is that I think we're already beginning to see that some of the most powerful and effective voices in the Democratic Party are coming from some of the newer members. And I think as a party, we should learn some lessons from that.
And so when you approached him to not run again, what did you say to him?
Look, it was really important to me to pay John the respect of a face-to-face conversation. And this isn't the first conversation we've had about this seat. But I said, John, I have an enormous amount of respect and admiration for you and for everything you've done. But I hope that you might think about this as the time when you pass the baton and let some new folks compete to carry that work forward, because this has to be our time to rebuild as a party. These years have to be our time to set a new direction and a new vision for the Democratic Party, so that in 26 we can take back the House, and in 28 we can take back the Senate and the White House.
There are some who have said that, even some people close to you have said that you really want to be governor down the road. Is that your ultimate goal, or do you see yourself serving in Congress?
My goal, look, the world has changed so much, and I think there is only one goal that any of us who care about our country and about the world right now should have, and it is defeating Donald Trump, defeating the movement that he's built, calling out the corruption and the lies, and being willing to look ourselves in the mirror and say, if we're going to do all that, we can't just be defenders of a system that isn't working for people. We've got to be willing to do some things, bigger things in a different way.
So how would you be different in Washington if you're elected?
Well, first of all, I think that we have to be talking about a broader set of issues. John, I commend John for his focus on Social Security. I would be proud to be a fierce fighter for protecting Social Security so that it's there not just for people who are getting it now, but for me, right, and for my kids. But it can't be the only thing that we talk about in this time when everybody is facing so many pressures. Whether you're talking about the cost of housing or health care or child care or electricity, we have to be talking about those issues. And we also have to be talking about the fact that we have a system that more and more feels to people like it doesn't work because it doesn't. You got a tax code that's riddled with loopholes that benefit billionaires and the wealthiest Americans. I want to see our member of Congress talking about those issues and fighting on those issues, and that's the kind of congressman that I will be.
So what kind of legislation would you push for if elected?
Well, some of those things we just talked about. On the tax code, I think it's way past time that we eliminate the carried interest loophole, that you make a tax code more progressive so that those at the very top are paying their fair share. Right now we have this crazy, it really never happened in American history before, where we're racking up trillions of dollars of deficits that we're going to saddle our kids with at the same time as we're slashing health care for millions of Americans. Also, we can give tax breaks to those who need them the least. We need to be fighting back forcefully on that. And it's also important to say, the job is not just in the subcommittee rooms or committee rooms anymore. It's not just giving speeches to an empty chamber in the House. The job is also getting out there and carrying a message relentlessly and clearly to the American people every day, everywhere, in every way we can.
I want to ask you about Hartford, because that's your record, and I've lived in Hartford for 32 years. It's my home, but a lot of people, when I tell them I live in the city, they look at me like I've got three heads. They think, Hartford's got a lot of problems, a lot of crime. There are, buildings that have been abandoned for decades, parking lots that have been barren for decades, and West Hartford Center is thriving just a mile or so away. What's your argument that Hartford isn't a better place and that you helped get it there?
Well, first of all, Dennis, it was the fact that Hartford had so many challenges and had so many problems that needed to be tackled in an honest, serious way that made me want to run for mayor in the first place. It was eyes wide open about the fact that we had a lot of challenges. And from inheriting a city that was bankrupt to leading through the pandemic, we really did face some of the biggest challenges that the city's ever faced. But we tackled those challenges honestly and seriously, right? We came in and shined a big bright light on the fact that the finances of the city were broken and that people hadn't told the truth about that before. And we told the truth, and then we got to work building the partnerships, building the coalitions, and making the really tough decisions that were necessary to get the city on a sound fiscal path. And then we began to build, and we began to attract investment. You see lots of housing going up, for example, in Hartford. Lots of housing of all kinds in all parts of the city, and that's something we made a big priority. And then we hit the pandemic, and we had to lead the city through a pandemic, which I think we did again by building those partnerships that allowed us to do it in the most responsible way possible. But I also think one of the ways we did it, one of the things that I'm proud of, is that we didn't hide those problems, didn't pretend that they weren't there. If there was a problem, I talked about it. I was the first to raise our hand and said, here's what's broken. And sometimes I said, I can't fix this by myself, so we're going to build partnerships to do it. I wish that we, in our politics nationally, and I wish that we in the Democratic Party were a little more willing to look ourselves in the mirror and look our constituents in the eyes and say, this is broken. It's not working, and we're determined to fix it.
Would you support term limits?
Yes.
How long should a U.S. representative serve? In your judgment?
I don't know. To me, once you start counting in decades, it seems like that's a good time. But I'm not saying one decade. I'm saying multiple decades. But I don't know. I think about that. But I do think that it is really healthy to see new voices come in, to see some turnover, to have new perspectives and new ideas. And I think that we should reject the idea that Congress has to be a place where you have to be there for decade after decade to make change. And I do think we're already starting to see that. I think we should embrace that change.
Former Hartford Mayor Luke Bronin, now a candidate for Congress in CT1. We appreciate you being in the program. We'll see you again.
Dennis. Good to see you.
And next week, we are joined by another first congressional candidate, Ruth Fortune. When we come back, the United Way.